She was built in 1849 for the coffee and tea trade. She was the largest ship built by Captain Lewis Hutchins in Matthews County at his shipyard at Fitch's Wharf. He was a very prolific shipbuilder. He built many, many ships, the Victory, the schooner Conquest, two schooners named after his daughters, the Betsy and the Sally, and he also built a side-wheeler steamship. So at the time of the Civil War, he was involved with trade between the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. He's also involved in guano, the trade in guano. So he was a pretty big mover and shaker in business. He also had a local store down at Fitch's Wharf, so he was also a merchant. So at the time of the war, the Union occupied the bay and started to get control of the Chesapeake Bay. So the way to squash the rebellion was to go after people like Captain Lewis Hutchins and the other shipbuilders in Matthews County, because they were the ones that were going to supply the enemy with goods and services. He was a member of a group called the Arabs. They were involved with blockade running, and they supposedly went to Cape Charles and blew up a depot, fuel depot. They would go to Cape Charles, bring goods back across the Chesapeake Bay, and those things would be loaded on wagons and they would be sent to Richmond to support the cause. During the war, the Yankee Navy would come to the house and they would raid the property many, many times. They would take the seine nets. They would take anything they could off the property. Food. At one point, they know there was wagons bound for Richmond loaded with corn to feed the enemy. They took his seine nets, gill nets, any type of boat that they could steal. They would take those, be it a log canoe or any type of sailing ship. So during one of these raids, they had gotten quite accustomed to the raids, and they would perch lookouts at a place called Hole in the Wall. And that was where Gwynn's Island sticks out into the bay, into Milford Haven. And they could sit at the home place and look out to Hole in the Wall and see if the Yankee steamers were coming up Stubbs Creek, okay? And at one point, they almost got caught off guard. Two steamers were coming up the creek, and they hid a lot of their valuables. At one point, Maddie Lee Hudgens was a little girl during the Civil War, his youngest daughter, and they set her on a back stoop of the house where they hid the family silver under her petticoat. All right? And evidently, the family story goes that a Union soldier came up and wanted to pick the girl up and say, "How are you, little girl?" And she just sat there and smiled and said, "I'm fine," in her nice southern demeanor, and was trembling all over because she knew she had the family silver hidden under her petticoat. The soldier went away. The raiding party that went to the house went inside the house, and there upon the mantelpiece was a Masonic emblem, because Captain Hudgens was a Mason. And they did not burn the house because the raiding person who was in charge of that party was also a brother Mason. So it's kind of an interesting thing to note that there was something that was beyond the war, that if you were a brother Mason, you wouldn't do any real harm or damage. They still stole and took the pigs, the chickens, and everything else, but they did not burn his house down. Okay. Is that enough?
Well, do you want to talk about the...
Now, this is the winter quarters. This was located up the hill, and this is how the soldiers would live in the wintertime. We found this archaeologically. It was basically a pit, and this would have been dug into the ground, and the pit level would have stopped here, and then you would have boarded it up, and this is called a wall tent. Now, inside, there's a chimney, and they would have had their barrels. When we did the dig, we found all types of artifacts, a burned mattress. There was also a ceramic vessel that was placed inside the hearth. That was amazing it survived. A lot of other things we found were curry combs. You know, curry combs are what you use to comb horses, brush horses. So there are a lot of curry combs, a lot of personal buttons, and also some mini balls were found. A lot of dietary remains also were recovered, oyster shells, things like that. The other thing that was very interesting on this site up the hill, we found a lot of cowrie shells. Now, cowrie shells were noted with African American culture, so there was also some wondering why did we find a lot of cowrie shells around that site. But anyway, this was one of the, we found 6, I do believe, of these winter quarters up there. Okay? That's it.